Committee members, if you would take your seats. First up will be bill introductions. I understand from committee members. Seeing none from committee members. Bill introductions from the audience. Representative Jacobs, you have a bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee. It's 22 RS 2935, and it's prohibiting abortion except in certain circumstances.
Without objection? Without objection. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee first. I'm going to explain what I'm going to do here. We passed out House Bill 2708 yesterday. That was the lab bill. That helpful. We found some really severe technical problems. I've been working with the reviser. Unfortunately, I think he may be on WebEx, Cal Hamilton. He's under the weather, and he called me this morning. We thought we may have an amendment that could fix it, but because of that, what I'm proposing to do is I'm going to do a motion to reconsider. It's the next day. If I get a second, it passes, the bill will come back into committee. And at some time later, if we need to fix it, we will fix it. And if we need to, we'll pass it out again. So with that, the chair makes a motion to reconsider House Bill 2708. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, Representative Epley. Any discussion on the matter? I tried to explain it as best, but if not, all in favor of the motion to reconsider, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Ayes have it. The bill is now back in committee. And if we choose to work it and they can get an amendment, we may do it later on, and we could do it as late as the veto session. So with that, Mike, you need not do a committee report. It'll be reflected in the minutes. The next bill that we're going to take up is 2717, better known as a sanctuary city bill. Take a second and get into your files and pull it up. With that, do I have, what is the pleasure of the committee?
Mr. Chair, I move that we pass out House Bill 2717 favorably for passage.
Thank you. Second, Representative Thomas, discussion.
Do you have the amendment?
The chair has an amendment. It'll be passed out. This is an amendment that was mentioned by the Attorney General in his testimony. Everyone's received a copy of it. It's kind of self-explanatory. And for that reason, I'm looking for a second. I have a second from Representative Powell on the amendment. Discussion on the amendment. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You said it was self-explanatory, but as you know, I'm one of the slower members of the committee. What does this do? And how does it, more particularly, I asked the question of the reviser relative to the subsection H, I think it was, and how this bill impacts that section.
I will turn to the reviser on that.
There would be a conflict without the amendment, and this bill provides, or this balloon provides, an amendment to 2520-908, which is attached, your attachment. And if you look on the amendment, the second page of the amendment. That I am fumbling here, sorry. There's a line on the second page there, sub E, an employee badge and the identification document stricken. So that would solve the conflict, I believe.
Go ahead, Representative.
So under current law, if I was still municipal judge and had my photo ID, that would be satisfactory, but this makes that unsatisfactory.
No, it's the employee badge. And so as a municipal court judge, you would have a badge that would show.
An employee badge is still okay.
Right.
One of these ID cards is not.
That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing no further questions on the, oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Representative Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mike, on the second page, it is, where number two, new section 5 is stricken. Can you kind of explain that? Does that have to do with profiling?
I think the amendment on page 2 is intended to be a more of a clarification of new section 5. The bill as written said the enforcement of federal law and communications with federal agencies shall be done without regard to race, religion, and so on. And what this does is it specifically references the racial and other bias-based policing that's already part of the Kansas law, and says it's unlawful to use racial or other bias-based policing in the enforcement of federal immigration law and communication with federal agencies within the scope of this act. And then it references the statute where that racial profiling appears in the statutes, and basically says if somebody believes that there has been a violation, they can file a complaint.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, Chair moves their amendment. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The bill has been amended. We are back on the bill. Discussion on the bill. No discussion on the bill? Oh, yes, Representative Heiberger.
I have an amendment.
You have an amendment. Thank you, sir. While he's handing it out, would you care to explain your amendment?
Yes, it strikes section 4 of the bill regarding municipally issued IDs. And I can go ahead and explain while it's being distributed.
Go right ahead, sir.
Our county clerk in Douglas County issues IDs for people to use who don't have other identification. They can use it for any number of purposes. I've actually assisted someone to get one of those IDs and then apply for a birth certificate from his home state so he could prove his citizenship. And the IDs themselves are not proof of citizenship. They don't pretend to be. I think you may recall from our hearing yesterday, I asked Mr. McCaskey whether the presentation of an ID when at the time you go to the polls is the purpose of that is proof citizenship. It is not. If you look at the acceptable IDs that you can present at the polls to prove your identification, a lot of those don't have anything to do with citizenship whatsoever. And so, I mean, this intent is not to do anything to weaken the voter ID requirement under current state law. I mean, it's under state law, all you're required to do at the polls is prove your identity, not your citizenship. And so I think this, I think the way Section 4 is described to me at some point was that it prevents issuing of IDs to undocumented immigrants, but it's way, way broader than that. I mean, the person I described earlier who I used this ID to get his birth certificate was not an undocumented immigrant. The people who use these IDs in Douglas County are, as far as I know, for the most part, aren't. I mean, they are citizens. So this would, so I think language is overbroad and would interfere with something good that my county clerk, who's one of the finest public officials in the state, in my estimation, is trying to do for the people of my county. So I appreciate your support in getting rid of Section 4.
Thank you. So what you're saying is that you're going to strike Section 4, which is the municipal identification card shall not be used to satisfy any requirements of state law for proof of identity, and each municipality identification card shall state on its face the statement not valid for state ID. So you're striking that portion, and renumbering. And then you're going down to, you're also striking the part of the violation of 1 and 9, which makes, I understand. Yeah. Okay, that's current. Thank you. Any other comments on the amendment? Yes. Rep. Camp. Well, I will tell you, I'm not supportive of the amendment. I mean, you're striking the Section 4 that's really the heart of this in many ways. But yes, Rep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So looking at the application, the voter registration application, it's kind of an on your honor system as I read it, whether a person is a citizen or not. And there was a process a few years ago that was in place to register to vote that a person did have to prove their citizenship. That was struck down. So now it's kind of a pretty open access. And I think now that municipal cards may also be a rather open process, we have two very open ways for somebody who's not a citizen to vote. And I think there's not an ideal situation right here with the bill or everything, but I do think the bill as written starts to tighten it up. And I think with the amendment, I'm going to vote against it because I think the amendment just loosens it all up and allows for the possibility of non-citizens to vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further discussion on the amendment? I need a second now that's been explained. Representative Clayton, which I think you had your hand up first. All right, Representative Clayton has seconded the amendment. Further discussion on the amendment? Yes, Representative Heiberger.
Yeah, I'm going to respectfully disagree with my colleague on the other side of the aisle there. I think this does nothing to allow non-citizens to vote that isn't possible already. I mean, you can register to vote. I mean, there's registration and showing up at the polls are two different things. I mean, this doesn't, changing this, striking this amendment or not, doesn't change the procedure for registering to vote. I mean, so, no, well, I'm not going to beat a dead horse, so.
Thank you. Further discussion? Yes, Representative Miller.
Just a reminder that claiming to be a citizen on your registration form and or voting is and remains a felony offense. So it's not like it's without consequence. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further discussion on the amendment of Representative Heiberger? Representative Heiberger, you may close.
I close and move my amendment.
Thank you. The representative closed on his amendment in House Bill 2717. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. Opinion of the chair. The noes have it. Noes. I didn't hear that, but division is called. I understand. You need to speak into the microphone when you do that. So all in favor of the amendment, raise your right hand.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
All opposed?
8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
Thank you. The amendment fails. We're back on the bill. Further discussion on the bill? Representative Heiberger.
Well, if nobody else is going to speak, I will. Yeah. I may be talking longer today than anybody else here wants to listen to, but I mean, the best way to prevent that in the future is to stop bringing bills like this. A couple of weeks ago, we heard a lot of testimony about the tyranny and the overreach of the federal government. I think that using the word tyranny to describe the state of affairs in the United States right now is just silly. But despite that, we heard about how tyrannical and overreaching the federal government was, and I find it more than just a little bit ironic that we're here today just debating a bill to force municipalities to enforce the statutes of the tyrannical and overreaching federal government. From my perspective, this body is at least as restrictive to my city, my community, as the federal government is the state of Kansas. I'm getting kind of tired of it, frankly. Just one more point. I think I've been in public service for 14 years now, county, city, and here. And it seems like to me there are two basic ways of approaching legislating and governing. One's a pragmatic approach where you try to, do as much good as you can for as many people that you serve, without, and not paying as much attention to, ideological purity. And then there's the sort of ideological, moralistic approach where you have a belief system and it's black and white and you stick to it and you do what's right no matter what the consequences are. And I see those two things colliding here. We have local people who are they have to deal with the facts on the ground. They have to deal with the consequences of federal immigration policy and its enforcement. And despite what you think about people who come here without documentation, they're people and they experience suffering. And if you really want to be strict about enforcing federal immigration law, I don't know what the numbers are now. I think they're down from before the Great Recession, but I would guess there are probably still at least 10 million undocumented people in the United States right now. If you want to, the way to deal with that, if you want to deport 10 million people, you're looking at one of the biggest economic and humanitarian disasters in world history. So there's got to be a different way to deal with it. And I think what we're looking at here is locals trying to deal with the situation on the ground, trying to make the best of the situation. It's the federal government's job to enforce immigration policy. I don't dispute that, but I guess I would just ask that you leave federal. Another thing, we're going to be passing a medical marijuana bill out of the session. It looks like possibly now. And do you want to pass a bill requiring municipalities to enforce federal marijuana law if we pass that bill? It's just something to think about. So I would encourage you to be pragmatic and not ideological today and not pass this bill out of committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In regards to the comments from the previous representative, state and local authorities work hand in hand with federal authorities on a number of issues. For instance, I'm sure the representative is aware that bank robberies are under the jurisdiction of FBI. Local and state authorities don't walk away and say, that's not my job, right? They assist. Moreover, what normally happens here, the application of this, the practical application is, in dealing with another situation, we discover that somebody is not documented in this country, and we have a protocol that we have to follow. By saying that a particular place is going to ignore that and not assist, and just pick and choose which laws are going to assist and which ones are not, because I'm certain Wyandotte County and others will continue to investigate bank robberies, for instance. They'll continue to work with federal task force and put members from their own divisions in this federal task force because there are state laws and local laws that coincide with the federal laws. And that's why we put together task force to do this. It's not that immigration laws in and of themselves are some kind of weird thing that we're doing and that's the only thing we're enforcing. But to say that we're not going to enforce them, I think we all have to have the conversation out loud. And that conversation is we are a land of the rule of law. And we have to understand why we have the rule of law. you know, voter integrity, voter election laws, those kind of things do enter into this because of some of the allegations that are being made in other states. And we want to preclude that. We want to stop that before it happens. Now, this ID that's being handed out, I'm going to tell you, I've worked many cases that were not, I mean, white people, brown people, black people use false IDs. And this is just another identification piece that can be fraudulently used for whatever purpose. It doesn't have anything to do with race when it comes to using IDs for ulterior motives. I'll stop there. That I'm going to be in support of this bill.
Thank you. Further discussion on the bill, Representative Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Being from Wyandotte County and somewhat familiar with the ordinance that came out of Wyandotte County, I saw people excited and happy that they'd have some form of ID where they can open bank accounts, register their kids to go to school, medical purposes, things of that nature. Nothing fraudulent they wanted to do or felonious. And I understand where the representative's coming from as far as people using fake IDs for different purposes. I used to use, and I hate to admit this here, where I used to use my brother's ID when I was 18 years old to buy other stuff, you know. But besides that, you know, you hear the term overreach and home rule. And I can remember several years back where there was a law being proposed in the state of Kansas where any type of gun component that was manufactured in the state of Kansas that the federal government would have no jurisdiction over. And as a matter of fact, it was proposed by several people that if federal government people would come in, they would be arrested if they tried to enforce laws violating the Kansas law. So we were enforcing home rule at that time. Where do we draw a line? Now we're having people go back into the shadows, just coming out of the COVID restrictions. Kids being afraid to go to school because of what may happen when they go to school. Families being afraid to venture out and be prosperous and add value to our community. I was talking to a gentleman yesterday at the co-op lunch, and I was asking, he was a wheat grower here in Kansas. And I said, well, what's going on with Ukraine and Russia? And now we're depleting some of the world's stock of wheat and corn. Is the state of Kansas going to be asked to step up? He said, well, that's what the market's telling us. We're going to have to step up now and start growing. I said, well, where are you going to get the labor if some of these laws go through to put these people back in the shadows? He said, that's another dilemma we're going to work with. I'll be opposing this law. I think it's an overreach. And I think there may be some, hopefully no racial intentions involved. But in Wyandotte County, when we saw the redistricting map, congressional map, divide Wyandotte County on I-70 north and south, and then this, you know, the question is, does your behavior reflect your values? I'll be opposing this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Representative Heiberger.
I'll keep it short this time. I just, in response to Representative Smith, I think we have prosecutorial discretion is exercised with regard to all crimes in our jurisdiction. You know, I think what this does is it takes away it's not going to prevent enforcement of immigration laws by local officials in municipalities. It's going to take away their prosecutorial discretion in terms of which ones they work with and which they don't. So I still oppose the bill.
Thank you. Further discussion on the bill? Yes, Representative Haswood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Immigration, wow. I mean, for us, 1492. So I just wanted to remind the committee there, from my count, there was 7 proponents and 64, I believe around that number, opponents. There was a very vast gap of what the public said that they wanted us to proceed forward. And, you know, I really hope there's no racial intent, but I'm not aware of any border issues on the Canadian border. It's always focused on our southern border. So if the shoe fits, that's where I see where I sit. So thank you.
You're quite welcome. Further discussion? Yes, Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this bill is well written. I think it's well intentioned. The issue at hand, the sort of meta issue, of course, is what has happened with the Biden administration and what they've done on the southern border, where you've had literally 2 million people in the last year come across, basically unimpeded. All this bill actually does is help not compound that difficulty. The Section 2 doesn't turn the local police into the agents of ICE. It merely prohibits, it stops a policy that would prohibit them from any way assisting federal authorities like they should. It doesn't ban municipal IDs. It just makes it very clear that they have a clear statement saying this is not valid for state purposes, and has some strength of wording as far as on just the whole notion of fake IDs. As the questioning to the conferees that we made here just a few days ago, part of it is also, I mean, with I-9 regulations, you know, you can't hire somebody, you're not supposed to hire somebody, you know, who doesn't have the proper documentation to prove that they're here as a green card or a regular citizen and such. Plus also, you know, this bill, it did come from the Attorney General. We actually had some later testimony from Kelly Warren, who is potentially our next Attorney General. And as Attorney General Schmidt, I've had a very excellent testimony, but said they used a law in Indiana that has already been faced court challenges as the basis for this law, and I think it's time for Kansas to follow this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Clayton.
Thank you. And, you know, should come as no surprise that I am a supporter, or excuse me, in opposition of this legislation. And my opposition is mostly based along the lines of workforce issues. We've been hearing, in particular, since COVID hit, about the workforce crisis that we have in all sectors. And I think that if we're trying to push against a group of people that just want to come here and work, they don't want to vote, they don't care about our elections. And after listening to us, I can't say that I would blame anyone. But honestly, we can't sit here and constantly complain about workforce issues, which we do. We hear that quite a bit in commerce and tax and a lot of our business-related committees, while at the same time passing legislation that deters people who are willing to do work that not very many other people do. As to any support of senators that have aspirations for attorney general, the support of that senator makes me an even stronger no. That individual is incompetent, and what they support would be wrong.
Thank you. Representative Arnkamp, do you have a comment?
Just a quick one, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So with regards to some of the testimony in opposition and also the workforce concept, I think before this bill and after this bill, an I-9 form has to be filled out. The process for employment is the same. So I see no change in employment opportunities before or after this bill. And I think all the opposition, and we heard in testimony, I don't understand the opposition because it's not really affected with this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, Representative Ardenberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we pass out House Bill 2717 favorably for passage as amended.
Thank you. You have heard the motion of Representative Arnberger to move House Bill 2717 as amended out. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
In opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. The bill passes out. You'd like to have your votes registered? Very well. Representative Hoyt? No. No. Representative Clayton? No. Representative Miller? No. Representative Reese? No. Representative Hazelwood? No. Representative Wagner would be a yes. And Representative Heiberger, you would be a no? Oh, yes. Representative Henderson's a no. Thank you, Representative. As to the yeses, you can look around. Connie? I'll read them off. Okay, I'm sorry. At Representative Thomas is a yes. Representative Hauser is a yes. Burris is a yes. Anybody else want to be a yes? Okay. Representative Penn is a yes. Is that it? Thank you very much. Folks, let's turn to your files again. Okay. I'm going to take up 2681, seized and forfeited firearms. This was a bill that we heard some time ago. For that purpose, Chair recognizes Representative Arnberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we pass out House Bill 2681 favorably for passage.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Representative Reese. Discussion on the bill. Representative Hoyt. We turned it off for you. Use the other mic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to offer an amendment.
Thank you. Mike, you have the amendment. Would you like to explain your amendment while it's being handed out?
Yes. The bill, HB 2681, adds in language that treats ammunition differently than in current law. So it says firearms or ammunition. And when you look at the bill, the definition of weapon, we are supposed to use that definition described in KSA 2021 Supplemental 216301. That's criminal use of weapons, and it doesn't include ammunition at all in that definition. Then we're supposed to use KSA 222512 as the means for determining which firearms would be destroyed, that these would not go back into public circulation. And those are convictions for capital murder, murder in the first degree, murder in the second degree, voluntary manslaughter, and involuntary manslaughter. And so what this amendment does is it adds, since it's otherwise silent on it, it treats the firearms and ammunition the same for those particular convictions, that we would not be putting those back for public sale or potentially recirculation in the public. A lot of times this ammunition wouldn't be released for evidence, but I think we need to make it very clear that we don't intend for ammunition involved in such severe crimes to go back in for public use. And I don't see this as any sort of gun safety, gun violence prevention amendment. I see it as victims advocacy, respecting the surviving family members and friends of individuals and potentially law enforcement who've experienced these severe tragic crimes. And I do believe, looking back at the Las Vegas shooting, there were 1,600 rounds left just in that person's car. And again, I know that ammunition is not likely to ever come out of evidence, but I do believe that ammunition is part of that story, and unloading that person's gun and putting that back out there, I think is inappropriate. And I would just like to clarify, since we are adding more ammunition to the rest of this law, that we include that in the statute that's referenced as how to deal with these circumstances.
Thank you. A very good explanation, but I'm going to look to the reviser to see if it's exactly what you told us it was. Mike, if you just give us an overview of the amendment.
Well, I think Representative Hoy explained it in terms of we amend the section that's referred to in the bill, 222512, and just add the words ammunition to several places where a firearm is destroyed, and her desire is that ammunition be destroyed also in those situations where a firearm would be destroyed.
Thank you. Discussion on the amendment. Yes, Representative Thomas.
I think I have a question for the carrier of the amendment, if she would partake. You mentioned law enforcement. I'm curious what they had to say about this amendment. Did you talk to them or work with them on this, just out of curiosity?
I did mention it to our what I would say the chief trusted law enforcement, and they're neutral on all aspects of this bill.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, she also asked me about it, and one of the things that I mentioned about it was normally if we have one of those heinous crimes committed and something is taken as evidence, especially involving a murder or some capital crime, it's not likely that evidence is ever going to leave because of the nature of the crime. The statute of limitations is too long. One, two, the nature of their being able to appeal, et cetera. I mean, that's going to sit there for years. Normally, the other part of it is we aren't in the habit of releasing ammunition back to victims of those type of crimes. While it could happen, it would happen on such a rare occasion that I can't see this to be an issue or a problem. I'm not going to support the amendment.
Thank you. Further discussion on the amendment? Seeing no further discussion on, I need a second. Representative Reese will second the motion to amend. Any further discussion? Representative Miller?
Well, I wasn't going to support the amendment, but based on the remarks of our deputy sheriff, since this amendment is inconsequential, I don't see why we wouldn't support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative, you may move your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do think that there are sensitive issues when hearing from survivors of violent crime and their family and the victims. And I think we should spell it out very clearly, our intent that we do not intend to ever recirculate ammunition that was involved with capital murder, murder in the first degree, murder in the second degree, voluntary manslaughter, and involuntary manslaughter. So I close and move my amendment.
Thank you. You've heard the amendment, the motion by Representative Hoyt to amend House Bill 2681. All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The noes do have it. The amendment fails. We're back on the bill. Further discussion on the bill? Seeing no discussion. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Representative Hoyt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would point out that we did receive neutral testimony regarding concerns for the way this bill is written. It would allow for some instances where the individual that the firearms or ammunition is seized from, where they would have to provide, actually law enforcement would have to give the guns and ammunition back to that individual, while they would have to go to the court and explain why, in fact, that person should not have possession of the firearm or ammunition. So I was hoping that there would be amendment on that. I should have probably worked on that, but since my amendment didn't go on, I wouldn't be supportive anyway. But I would point that out, that there are some technical issues that make it more difficult for law enforcement. It's going to give them more work on the back end.
The revisor told me, are you offering the amendment?
No, I was just pointing out that I would not support
Okay.
without that on there.
Thank you. Further discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Representative Arnberger, you wish to close on your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I close and move my motion.
Thank you. You have heard the Representative Arnberger move to pass out House Bill 2681 favorably. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. The bill passes out. Committee.
May I have my vote recorded, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No vote.
Representative Hoyt wants her vote recorded as a no. Representative Heidberger would like to have his vote recorded as a no. Anyone else? No. Thank you. City committee, I'm taking up 2715. Representative Howe, you need some time to get an amendment. Do you have an amendment? And if so, would you make your motion?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. I move that HB 2715 be moved out of favorably out of committee. And I do have an amendment.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Representative Miller is the second. Discussion. Representative Howe?
Yes, just to give you a brief overview of the amendment as the advisor passes that out. Basically, I just clarified the deadline about this training and certification course being implemented. And I also struck out the line about the certification shall not require a test. I decided that it should just be up to the KCCOA and the Secretary of State's office to make that decision. Oh, and I should also add, I did also add in that this could be done as an online course.
Okay. Normally, we're working the bill. I do have the Secretary of State's office because they are a state agency. I would ask them to look at it also while we're doing that. Discussion on the amendment. Mike, could you just quickly explain the amendment?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. The amendment, I think, is intended to be a clarification, and it was pointed out during the hearing that there was a statute that already required training. And so what I did with Representative Howe's amendment with her direction, I included the things that are in KSA 25-124, which is the simple statute that basically says that the Secretary of State has to provide training for election laws for the local election officials. And I've added that in and clarified, as Representative Howe asked for, that it could be an online course. And then it repeals the current law because there's if you pass this with and allow the current law, you've got basically duplication. So the thought was to get rid of the duplication by repealing it, but adding in anything that was in 25-124.
Thank you. Before I come to you, Representative Heiberger, I do have the Secretary of State's office, and they are the experts in these areas. You've read the amendment, correct, sir? Clay Barker, Secretary of State's office, just for the record.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I've read the amendment.
You what?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I've read the amendment, and
you're fine with it?
We're fine with this. As I've testified before, it essentially takes the previous law and what our current practice is and puts it in statute.
Thank you. Representative Heiberger, comments?
Yeah, I think the amendment satisfies all the concerns I had about the bill, and if amended, I will support the bill.
Thank you. No, I need a second now that's been explained. Representative Hoyt, correct? Now, further discussion. Representative Miller, no? Anyone else wishes to comment? If not, Representative, you may close on your amendment.
I close.
Thank you. You have heard the motion by Representative Howe to amend House Bill 2717. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. The bill has been amended. We are back on the bill. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment.
Thank you. Would you like to explain your amendment while it's been handed out?
I would love to. This amendment simply incorporates the provisions of HB 2565 into the underlying bill, which I do support both. 2565 is a bill that we did have a full hearing on. There were a couple of proponents, a couple of esteemed county commissioners from Sedgwick County. There were no opponents. All it does is it requires that if you've got the amendment in your hand, it's on the back of the page. It adds a paragraph that says each county election officer shall provide precinct level election results electronically in machine readable format, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. I'm going to have the revised here, then I'll have the Secretary of State's office, and then we'll have discussion. Mike?
Again, I think Representative Miller explained what it was. We're adding a bill into this, and the amendment just adds a new subsection to 253206. Each county election officer shall provide precinct level election results electronically in a readable format for all federal offices, statewide and legislative offices, and local offices, not later than 30 days after the final canvass. That's it.
That's it. Thank you. Would the Secretary of State's office like to weigh in?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Clay Barker again. I think in our past testimony, just to refresh everyone, the Secretary of State's office already does precinct level results for federal, statewide, and legislative offices, but not for local. This would only cover general election results and not primaries. And it says 30 days after the final canvass. Other than the local offices, the final canvass is the state canvass. And since this is a county report, it could be done 30 days after the county canvass, because that's all the county would be aware of. Otherwise, it really just affects the county election officers and not our office, so we don't have an opinion one way or the other on it.
Thank you. Representative Miller.
A question, Mr. Barker. If I may, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry?
If I may ask.
You may.
None of that was offered as anything opposing the amendment. Right?
Correct, Representative. We're not neutral on the amendment. It's
very good.
It doesn't
Thank
affect
you.
our office.
Thank you.
Further discussion on the amendment? Yes, Representative Berg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question either could go to the maker of the motion or to the reviser. I guess my question, what is a readable format?
Well, my understanding is that there's some counties that there is, they provide this information, but it's in a type of format that is difficult to manipulate the data. But Representative Miller may have a specific.
Yeah, the key word is before readable format. It's machine readable. Right now, as I understand it, I don't have a problem in my county, but it's been presented to me in Sedgwick County. If you ask for precinct level results, you get a report that's some 2,800 pages long. You can't load it and manipulate the data to be able to single out a particular race. You have to flip through all 2,800 pages to find the information that you need. This would simply put those counties that don't have that in the same status that those who do have it, such as Shawnee. And again, it was two commissioners, county commissioners, one from each party, that had a problem with their attempts to recover this information. It is my understanding it is not isolated to Sedgwick County, but because of its size, I think that's probably where one of the biggest issues is. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Penn. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for to the carry of the amendment. I had two questions. Number one, we've heard a lot today about local control on some other bills. This one right here seems to be that all counties must be compliant with this, whether or not it's something that's within their budget. First question is, what's the impact of this to the budget of the county election offices?
I don't recall if we had a fiscal note, but I personally believe it to be inconsequential.
Okay. And then notwithstanding where it has a shall right there, for those counties such as Sedgwick that has this for their own local control reasons, that they have the format that they want, should we add permissive language in there versus the shall, perhaps a may?
May I, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
It's actually two local officials that are asking for this so that a state appointed official will provide the locals with what they need. The two county commissioners are local elected officials. They're asking for it. They're trying to get it from the election commissioner that's appointed by the Secretary of State.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I would be more favorable of this amendment if it allowed the flexibility for the local level, since the Secretary of State's office has said it has no impact to them and they're agnostic on it, for the county election officers to have a may there, to allow them the flexibility on how they choose to push out that report for what the amendment calls. And with that, I would like to, if the chair allows, make that substitute amendment, changing that word shall to may.
Well, if you're making a substitute, it's not in writing, correct? You're just striking one word? All right. So I'll need to take that up first, since it's a substitute. Any other comments on substituting shall to may? Sorry, I have a second. Do I have a second?
He's saying you need one.
Yeah, I do. But first I want to see if there's any questions to the carry of the amendment, so people like to understand it before. If not, is there a second to that? Making the substitute from shall to may? Representative Thomas will second that. Discussion on it? Go right ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, since my husband was one of the county commissioners that requested this, that I believe the word shall is important in this case and in our county in particular, just because it is possible that if we change the word shall to may, since the election commissioner is appointed and not at all under, and of course, in all the county clerks are elected, so they're not at all under the purview or control of the county commissioners, that the elected official in this case could just choose not provide the information in a format as requested. So I think that's why the word shall is important. And just a little slightly further comment, being able to take this information and this data and then just to say export it into Excel, for example, would be what we're talking about. So you could manipulate the data and calculate, who voted, who didn't vote, et cetera, et cetera. Looking at that voter data information is the kind of thing that we're talking about right now. Our machines that we use in Sedgwick County are set so that it gives great graphics and things like that, but it doesn't actually currently break it down in a data usable and easily exportable fashion. But our machines are capable of just having the settings changed to produce it in a different way. So this bill just requires it to be presented in a way that's more user friendly.
Further discussion, Representative Miller.
Essentially the same thing. To put the word may in here negates the whole purpose of the amendment, because they may do it now. The problem is some of them refuse to do it. And this is a situation where apparently the request has been made and she refuses to do it for whatever reason. But it makes it very difficult for the public to access this information. Thank you.
Representative Heiberger.
We must have the same software in Douglas County as you in Shawnee County. I mean, before we got it, every year I'd get every election, get a 2-page printout with all the precinct data in it. I could tell how things went in my election. Now I have to comb through pages and pages, and it takes several hours to compile the results of my own election. I think it's reasonable to ask the county clerks to make this data available to the public in a easily accessible fashion. So I would oppose the substitute motion and support the original motion.
Representative Epley.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I just think, like the representative said here, I think if we change those words, it doesn't become binding. And if we leave the word shall in there, it's certainly more binding or will. And I see merit in that. So that's all. Thank you.
Representative Penn. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Vice. And to answer back to the good representatives, that's exactly correct. And I'm glad that the representative agrees that we should be able to ask, as you just said, the counties to, you said that you would like, that we should be able to ask the counties to do this. I think that the permissive language of may, since we don't know what the fiscal impact is, since we've discussed that we want to have local control, and since some of those positions are elected, leave that back to the people. If they have that particular software or that particular printout, whatever the case is, leave it back to the counties to determine whether or not they want to come into this. I don't think it ought to be something that's top down with a shall. For us to basically mandate, and I know how many members here are against mandates, to mandate that every county must comply with this and leave them no flexibility and no opportunity to use the mechanisms of their elections. If their people don't like the reports that are coming out, they can elect different officials who will allow that to happen. Hence the may. It's already on the books. They can comply if they want to, and they don't have to bust their budget, since we don't know how much this is going to cost. Not just Sedgwick, which might have budget for it, but smaller counties that don't have the budget for it. And with that, I'm good.
Thank you. Then you close.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I close.
Thank you. You wish to respond first? Thank you. Go ahead, Representative Miller.
I would just remind the committee that we received no opposing testimony from anyone, including any county clerks. And I did advise the representative of the County Clerks Association of this legislation, and he reported it to his membership and reported no issues, cost or otherwise.
Thank you. Now you can close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I close.
Thank you. You have heard the motion by Representative Penn to substitute the word shall with may in Representative Miller's amendment. No further discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. We are back on your amendment. Representative Miller. Do you wish to close?
If there's no discussion.
Oh, on the substitute? On this amendment?
Me, yeah, that'll be fine. So any further discussion on Representative Miller's amendment? Seeing no further discussion, Representative Miller, you may close on your amendment.
I close.
You've heard the motion by Representative Miller to amend, excuse me, 2715. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. The bill is amended. Representative Miller.
To preserve matrimonial harmony, I move that we recommend House Bill 2715 favorably as amended.
Would you allow me to go back to the original maker of the motion? It was her bill, and I would like to.
Yeah, I know, but
But you had the amendment.
I think it's risky.
That's risky.
Now that it has some other. Yes, sir, I will yield.
Would you yield? Thank you. Representative Howe, would you like to make a further motion?
I make a motion to pass HB 2715 as amended.
Thank you. You have heard the motion of Representative Howe. That was a second, not that I needed, but from Representative Miller. You've heard the motion by the representative to pass out 2715 as amended favorably. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Couple of things. I have two other bills, and but I'm not sure we're going to be working on it. There are the state historical conveyances. We did get a letter from the tribal chief. Did everybody get that? Tony, we send that out, so you should have that. The Attorney General's office is still uncertain. I know it passed the Senate by a large number. What I have done is there is an amendment to it, correct, Mike? Which I think solves the problem. So it looks like we have sufficient time. I'd like to take that up now. I know I told you yesterday we'd get you out here early, but I see no objections in the committee. Let's take it up. Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, or come back tomorrow. That's always the threat. So, as to SB 405, State Historical Society conveyance of certain properties, what is the pleasure of the committee?
Mr. Chair, I move that we pass House Senate Bill 405 favorably for passage.
Seconded by Haswood.
Thank you.
Seconded by Haswood.
Second, Representative Haswood is second. The chair has an amendment. I have it. And the amendment reads on page 1 at line 30. The Shawnee tribe further agrees that such land described in section A and any land adjacent or is near the cemetery shall be used. Well, it says
He did it. He did it.
there will be a correction in this amendment. Shall not be used as a casino or other gaming facility. Now Mike's blaming the proofers here. But let's understand that you can write that in your amendment. That's what we're talking about, not as it's written here. You take your pen and ink and change that.
Mr. Chairman, it seems that today is the day of the one-word substitute amendments.
Yes. So the intent of my amendment is shall not be used as a casino or other gaming facility. Mike, that's correct. It's pretty self-explanatory. As for that, I've explained the amendment. Is there a second? Representative Penn? That's fine. Discussion now. Representative Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just ask if there's, to me, a better way to accomplish what we seek to accomplish is simply require a deed restriction on the transfer. Then there's no mistake whether someone agreed or didn't. It's simply transferred with the deed restriction that says you cannot do it. And perhaps this language is enough to require that. I don't know.
Well, I'm also thinking that this is a Senate bill. It has been amended. It will go to conference. I have talked with the AG's office. They seem to think that by the time we get to conference, because I've talked with my counterpart on the Senate side, because it's amended, he's going to non-concur. We'll get it into conference and then get the exact language. And they're presently working on it. The problem, if I don't get it out today, we may not have another opportunity.
No, and I don't oppose the amendment.
I understand.
I was trying to act smart. I have to act.
Well,
but
I would never say you had to act.
In addition,
I know your intelligence level is very superior to at least mine, but probably not some of the other members here.
Well, I was once called clever, and I didn't take that as a compliment, but I take yours as a compliment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
But if I may,
please.
In addition to the information we've received since this hearing, we received a memo relative to the Shawnee tribe that was
from research
from Mr. Milholland.
Yes.
And if you haven't read that, please read that. There's a lot of sadness in there. It's a good history lesson, one we should all be cognizant of, and it is representative of the tragedy of how we've handled our indigenous peoples. But it's a very good synopsis of the kind of thing they've suffered. Thank you.
I agree, and I did have it sent out to all the members. I wanted research to give us the history. With that, I think Representative Heiberger, did you not have a question?
Yeah, I basically share Representative Miller's concerns. I think that the statement in statute that the Shawnee tribe agrees to something doesn't create any sort of a binding requirement on anybody. So, but I will, with the chairman's description, I will go ahead and support it and hope that it's fixed in conference.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of the Barker's amendment to House Senate Bill 405, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. We are back on the bill. Further discussion on the bill? Seeing none. You made that. Representative Arnberger, would you like to make an additional motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we pass out Senate Bill 405 favorably for passage as amended.
You have heard the motion by Representative Arnberger to pass out Senate Bill 405 as amended favorably. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Representative Hoyt would like her vote recorded as a yes. Representative Clayton would like her as a yes. Representative Reese as a yes. Representative Hazelwood would be a yes. Thank you for allowing me to get that out of our plate. If you'll note, I'm sorry, Representative Heiberger, you were yes to. Okay, thank you. I'm trying to give you some details. We've got a little time. As you know, there was a gaming bill, sports betting bill that was been entered. It's been read in now. That's one that's been worked on for, well, at least this summer, quite a bit, and it's passed bills. I think we're going to work on Tuesday, have a regular committee meeting. The leadership has indicated they may give me that date to work. So please pay attention to Connie's emails on the agenda. What I'm hopeful to do, we'll go in at 11 o'clock that day on a normal day. I know we're on the floor all day, but start the thing at 11. I think you'll enjoy the hearings. It's nice to see no opposition on any bill. So with that, anything else for the good of the committee? Yes, Representative Miller.
We have a member with a birthday.
We do?
Mm-hmm.
Who? You?
No, Representative Moser.
Say to you.
Birthday to you. Happy birthday, Rep Moser. Happy birthday to you.
The St. Patty's girl.
Thank you. And now if everyone else would give me your dates of your birthdays so we can have that announced, I would be grateful. Thank you.
Anything else for the good of the committee? Yes, Representative Clayton.
Yes, Mr. Chair, will we be working tomorrow?
No. I hope you're all headed home in the afternoon. With that, Representative Epley.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just a little paranoid as we come up on the 24th. And do we need to work on Monday to get this done that you put out for us? I just want to make sure we've got enough time because we've been in the time crunch last year, and I don't want to get caught in that again, Mr. Chairman.
I think if the committee works with me, we'll be able to do this. I'm not doing it Monday because testimony has to come in on Sunday. And I don't want Connie to come in on Sunday.
Okay.
I always think of her first, after my wife, but up here, she's the most important person. But that's the reason I looked at Tuesday, is because Sunday, if we do it Monday, then all this testimony has to be in the day before, which is Sunday, and I don't want Connie to come in. Okay? So it's one of those well thought out plans. Anything else for the good of the committee? Yes, Representative Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just you sports fans, KU plays the late game tonight so that way you can sleep in after you watch the game until midnight and enjoy your weekend. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. We are adjourned.